Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. Antilles Gold, everyone knows we've been a large supporter, and I'd say a few of the real highlights and why Sean and I like it so much is that Cuba gold, probably not very well known over the last century due to many political reasons and underexplored regions. But what really is attractive to us is not only the vast resource there, but particularly the high grade, because we all know that high grades lead to A, lower mining costs, and B, a higher ESG score, and really gives that huge potential upside that we're looking for in investments, especially as, in case you aren't aware, the markets have been a lot harder, more challenging in the last 3 or 4 months. And this gives us some margin of safety. And then, turning it onto the management side, Brian, certainly is a proven leader and a proven winner. So when you have a big resource with a strong management team, that usually leads to good outcomes for shareholders. And with that introduction, Brian and Chris, maybe the best place to start for people that aren't quite so familiar with the story is to start with Cuba and gold. For either one of you, if you don't mind just giving people like a little bit of an overview.
Well, I might just go first, but I think I'd like to spend a reasonable amount of time today speaking through Chris effectively on our exploration upside.
Yeah, definitely.
And for those that don't know us, the company is obviously focused on Cuba. We're effectively a first mover in a new frontier. The country's been extensively explored over many years by Canadian companies, Russians, Cubans themselves, obviously, but has basically been undeveloped for 30 or 40 years. The last and only development during that period has been that of Trafigura, who invested in a $300 million base metals mine recently. And other than Trafigura, we're the only company in the country heading towards a development. And I think what you might find interesting today, Greg, is that we are shifting our focus actually as a consequence of the quality of the exploration properties that we've picked up. We're going to be in the future focusing on copper concentrate production and really utilize the cash flow from the first gold mine. In fact, we've now got a second one in the pipeline to support the bigger projects that will ultimately be producers of copper concentrates and zinc concentrates in other locations. So I want to particularly spend some time on the upside for this company. So I think maybe I'll just briefly say that the two gold properties, one is a sulfide gold silver deposit on the Isle of Youth. It's called La Demahagua. We're quite well advanced on that particular mine. The DFS will be completed in November this year. It's been subject to 80,000 meters of drilling. It's got a resource for the open pit mine that we are focused on initially of around about 850,000 ounces equivalent gold. The grade's pretty good. It's just on 3 grams per ton for the gold. And we've actually produced a JORC resource, initial JORC resource just for the open pit of the 850,000 ounces I talk about. We've produced a scoping study that I think will be as accurate as the DFS when it's completed, to be frank, because a lot of the costs are based on turnkey offers for plant and equipment and so forth.
Right.
And that mine is actually expected to spit off around 50 million a year surplus cash going forward for 6 years. That's US dollars, and then we'll go underground for another 10. So it's a nice little earner. It's not a spectacular mine. It's simple, straightforward. We're going to sell a sulfide concentrate.
Right.
We're dealing at the moment with a major international trading company to establish an offtake agreement. Have to have that in place for the DFS to be completed anyway. And our intention is to start construction in January next year and commission that mine in mid-2024. It'll produce about 100,000 ounces of gold per year, gold equivalent per year in the concentrate, 70,000 tonne of concentrate, and it'll be sold at the mine site effectively to a trader.
Got it.
That's the first project. The second one is really not out there per se. We have advised the market that we've picked up a large porphyry copper gold deposit, and it has an oxide cap on it that is very gold rich and copper, in fact, oxide deposit. And that will probably be our second mine, relatively low capital costs. And that should be in production a year or so after the first one. So between the two of them, we'll be generating quite good. The joint venture company, I should add, it will be generating good cash. And the concept for the joint venture company, which is with, I might add, the government's mining company, Minera, which is also Trafigura's partner. They're a very good partner. And having them there helps us fast track the project. We're going quite fast. So we've got potentially 2 projects there. They will support financially the development of these larger properties that Chris would like to talk about. And I think it would be appropriate initially just for Chris to give a little bit of his background.
Of course.
As an explorationist.
Yeah, because Chris, people invest in people. So
That's
it would
right.
be great to hear your background a little bit. And obviously, you know, big exploration upside, we're eagerly awaiting it.
Okay, so I'm an Australian geologist. I've been in South America for about 25 years now. So the last 12 years I spent in Colombia. So Colombia 12 years ago was a frontier country, very similar to what Cuba is now. We had the opportunity, being a front runner in Colombia, to look at a whole series of projects and look for projects that were either fell through the gaps, low-hanging fruit, or hadn't been recognized previously. So I was involved with 2 companies there. The first was Continental Gold. That was the discovery of the Buritica gold deposit, which was 11 million ounces. It was sold to Zijin from China for $1.5 billion. So that was a fantastic discovery. It was pushed through to development and production and is now in the hands of Zijin. So Colombia at that stage was very much an opportunity that had been overlooked. It wasn't understood well by previous explorers, and the opportunity was there. So we spun off another company called Cordoba Minerals. That was a large copper gold discovery, Alacran, and that was sold to Robert Friedland's HPX group, now Ivanhoe Electric, and that's in pre-development. So we had 2 really good discoveries. We managed to build a lot of value over a short period of time. So at the end of that period, after selling both those companies, I actually got in touch with Brian at Antilles Gold, because I saw Cuba as being that same frontier kind of environment. So Antilles was definitely a first mover there. Trafigura is there. They're working on the north coast. What Antilles had done, it's built a very strong relationship with Minera, and that's allowed us to look at a whole series of projects throughout Cuba. So basically the exploration history of Cuba recently was the Soviets that went in, and then they packed up and left. The Soviets basically went in and just found things that were sticking out the ground, outcropping, and did very little exploration and built mines. And then at the end of the Soviet Empire, they basically just left. So there was another rush into Cuba in the early to mid 90s, and that was mainly Canadian juniors. They did a lot more technical exploration, but they weren't there long enough to carry through. So again, there was some good work done, but they didn't really carry through on the work. And that was the opportunity, because BRIEX happened, all those guys couldn't be funded anymore and they left. So these are the databases that we've had the opportunity of reviewing. So as Brian said, we looked at about 30 projects in Cuba, of which we've taken 2. There probably will be a 3rd one. So the first project, I'll talk about it briefly, is the El Pilar project, which was run by a Canadian junior in the mid to early 90s. So basically what they did, they found an oxide copper gold deposit. They did a lot of RC drilling there, but it was only very shallow. They basically looked at it purely as being an oxide copper gold, a very rich gold cap with copper leached down to the lower part of the oxide zone there. What they didn't work out is that it's the upper part, the oxidized part of what looks like a very large copper gold porphyry deposit, which is in situ. So copper porphyries, as you know, they can be very large. This one is definitely, it's fertile. There is metals in the oxide zone, but they didn't drill below that. So it's wide open. And
is that the opportunity? Sorry to cut you off, Chris, but is that, like, as a geo, is that what gets you excited, is like the potential that's there?
Oh, definitely, because porphyry systems are very large. So This is something that was drilled, only the oxide part of it. They didn't recognize that there was a sulfide part below it. In the porphyry system, having a look at it at surface, we're definitely in the preserved upper part of it. So potentially there's a kilometre of mineralization below that. So if you look at the big porphyry discoveries in South America, you look at companies like Solaris and Sol Gold in Ecuador. These are really big systems and they can build value in a company very, very quickly. So we're really excited about Pilar. It's something that with very little work, because the initial discovery has been made, they just didn't recognize it, can be followed up to create a big discovery.
Right. And would that also be focused, and for either one of you, but primarily Chris, would you be looking more for the copper than gold, so to speak?
Well, copper's hot right now, and it's going to be for a long time.
That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
Yeah,
well, that's
exactly.
why we're heading there. Exactly.
Yeah. But
So
to me,
guys,
Cuba, is
Greg,
very much a particularly copper frontier.
Greg, I might just interrupt there. And I went to Geomanera about 6 months ago, and I said, I know we're going to try and build a mining company here together, but I would like to refocus our attention on copper prospects. I don't think there's any major gold deposits. We've got hold of the biggest known one, at least in the country already.
Yeah.
And I asked them for copper prospects. They said, have a look at these 22. Okay. It actually turned out to be 30 that Chris went through and culled most of it, finished up with 3. 2 are already contracted, and the third one I'm negotiating at the moment. And he will talk about the second one in a moment. But El Pilar is probably the outstanding property that we've got. And the focus will be on copper, but we want to get these 2 little gold projects off the ground to support the very expensive developments that might follow.
Right. I was going to say that they become cash flow machines, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Correct. Exactly.
But just on that, like development it's not cheap. How's your balance sheet looking now? Like with any junior miner, I know it's hard.
What a terrible question to ask a guy.
I know that the balance sheet is
What's
like,
your credit card balance?
you'd love a lot more cash in there, but obviously you don't want to keep diluting. What's the balance sheet looking like now? And in an ideal world, how much would you like in there in cash? And forgetting about dilution and all that.
Well, forgetting dilution, and that's something we're going to hopefully avoid by attracting the sort of people we've been talking to in London, Europe, and Canada, to be frank. Right. We're starting to talk to serious professionals. A little bit of buying started already, as you can see from the market going up recently. And I think that we're going to, with a few visits and follow-ups, see a lot of support from the right sort of investor. And hopefully that'll avoid maximising dilution. But what being frank, what we need to do is probably raise another $5 million to complete the DFS. $8 I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then Chris is going to probably spend 10 million US over the next 3 years on preliminary exploration on these 3 properties. And I might just add, the way they are structured, we do the preliminary exploration and a scoping study on each of them. If it's got legs, we like the look at both technically and commercially. We then ask for those properties to be transferred into the mining joint venture for development. So the risk at this early stage is out.
Or the next day that you'll feel any satisfaction about what you've done. Shot right on, rebound.
Sorry about that, guys.
Greg loves his,
you're in Toronto, so you'd know about NHL hockey.
Yeah. So ultimately, $3 to $5 million to get the DFS finished, and probably 10 million drawn down over the next 2 or 3 years for Chris's preliminary actions.
So Brian, do you think you can get a big chunk of that in debt, or is it you're going to keep coming back to the market?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, we as you well know, we've got a claim against the Dominican Republic from a project we did previously. It's a claim for over 40 million Australian dollars. It's going through arbitration and a unit of the World Bank in Washington, DC. But unfortunately, that's a fairly drawn out process. We won't get the last session of that arbitration is June next year. Then takes the arbitration tribunal 6 months to make up their mind. and then probably another 2 or 3 months before we see a check. So it's out there, but it's more likely to be applied to development than it is to the short-term exploration activity. But we've had interest from people that could even come in into our holding company in Cayman Islands, and rather than dilute through continual, and this would be a professional investor who wants to participate actually in the long-term growth of a mining company in Cuba. A different type of investor might finish up providing that whole $10 million.
Right.
So we're talking to a couple of outfits at the moment who are really keen. They're not mining companies, but investors who like Cuba, like our growth potential, and rather than diluting through continual issues by Antilles Gold Limited, the parent company, we might sell off a small, not sell off, but bring in and dilute at that level, but at true value, not at the market capitalization. The true value is probably 3 or 4 times our market cap at the moment. And if we can get rid of 10 or 15%, then Chris will have the funds that he needs. But we'll find them some way or another, I can assure you.
Right. And then turning it back to Chris, again, you've had a lot of experience. You're looking, I'd imagine, for those, those real company maker type of, and frankly, resume maker projects. Can you just give us, like, in your ideal world, what should we look for in the next 12 months?
Okay, so as you said, I mean, if you're the first mover, you really want to be looking for the big discoveries, the big opportunities. There's no point spending your time looking at small to medium-sized things. So Antilles has been given that opportunity, which is very, very rare these days. So what we're looking for is something that's at surface, something that's large scale, like Pilar, something that we can get in there and we have to do very little work and we can start drilling very quickly. Working with the government in Cuba, you can have all of those things. So Antilles is something where there's very little exploration work that needs to be done pre-drilling. In fact, it's basically getting out there, doing a bit of surface work, doing some geophysics and start drilling. It's as simple as that. So that's the kind of large scale. We're looking for the large, kind of deposits that, will make a very huge difference to the valuation of Antilles. That's basically what we're looking for.
So, so said another way, the only way to get it to really do that is to get out there and start drilling, I suppose.
Yeah, and you can do that in Cuba because, first of all, the government is your partner. So everything moves ahead very, very quickly. Everything is expedited in Cuba. And then you have these projects like Pilar that have fallen through the gaps where really the discovery has been made. It just wasn't recognized. So we now have to go in there and advance that, do more drilling, deeper drilling, and basically outline what's there. So but the potential is huge.
Great. And can I, if you don't mind me asking, are you now going to be spending a significant amount of time over there in country?
I live in Medellin in Colombia, so I'm
okay. I didn't realize that. Okay.
So my back door is the Caribbean, so that's why I specialize in that area.
Right, easy. You jump on a plane, a few hours flight. Okay, got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt you, Greg? I can just see you get to ask a question, but we're going to start drilling at El Pilar in July next month, and we'll start getting the first results in September. And I think you'll see, when you see it, you'll see the results from this oxide cap are spectacular. We have 80 holes drilled in that property already by previous explorers, Canadians basically.
Yep.
They are spectacular. And in a couple of weeks' time, we will have an exploration target range produced for the oxide cap, not for the big shot, by Canadian consultants. They're working on it now, and we'll publish that in about 2 weeks' time. And I think that will get people fairly interested in what will become, I believe, our second mine. Low capital cost oxide, free digging, free milling gold, leachable copper. Very interesting little project on its own. But that's not the target Chris is after. It's the target I'm after in the short term.
Brian, how's the top 20 look? Like, who are the big ones?
The week before and the week before.
So there's no movement?
No, not a lot. Most of the, we don't have any large shareholders in the company other than myself, to be frank.
What do you own?
Just over 22%, I think, something like that.
Yep, and we did see you increase your stake recently.
Yeah, I buy them occasionally.
Yeah, which
Yep.
is encouraging when you have your when you're not blacked out, I suppose.
And
Well,
did
we have
any
so
of
many,
the,
we have so many blackouts these days. You know,
Yep.
we've got big news flow coming in the next 12 months. You know, Chris hasn't talked about the other two properties that we've got. We've focused on El Pilar because that's the prize. But maybe, Chris, you might just mention these VMS belts.
sorry, just before that, while we're on the top 20, did any of them participate in the recent placement? Apart from no, okay. But they're not buying or selling, they're pretty
Steady.
No, they're pretty stable.
yeah. You do have a pretty good broker behind you, being KS. We have worked with them, and they are quality. So not sure if Kit's on the call, but he's awesome. Sorry, JS. Ariella just corrected me. Sorry, Brian. Brian does get pretty angry with me from time to time.
I do, quite often.
He does. Yeah, he's pretty scary, especially when he's in his hotel room at night. He's get a bit scary on there.
Chris, maybe it's a good spot to talk about the other projects, though.
Please.
Okay, so the second project that we've selected and it's been granted by GM&ERA is what we call the New Horizons project. So New Horizons is basically an entire VMS belt. It's about 40 kilometers of strike length, and it was mined by the Soviets. So there was 4 producing copper zinc mines with gold, silver credits in them. And they were basically outcropping zones of mineralization. The Soviets went in, did a small amount of drilling, generally like 5 or 6 holes, and then started a small open pit and then went underground on them. So all of these ore bodies are open. At the end of the Soviet period, they basically packed up and left. The resources are still just sitting there. So the key with that belt is that with VMS systems, once you found a fertile belt and there's lots of surface showings, in fact, there's probably about another 20 showings along that belt. It hasn't had any modern exploration. There's been no airborne geophysics, so we'll fly that with airborne EM. Basically, with VMS systems is when you get a very fertile belt, which that is, there should be one statistical outlier in there, and that's the large deposit. So if you compare it what you see in the VMS belts in Canada, there's always one giant in there. So that's what we're looking for. But there's a second part to that story, and Brian will explain that to you.
Wait, you just broke down a little bit. Can you just repeat that last sentence?
Okay, so there's another part to the New Horizons story. Yeah, which Brian will explain, and that's short-term mining there as well from the old resources, the Soviet resources, which are still sitting there.
Yeah. Right. Again, thinking small rather than thinking big. We're very confident, and we're basing it to a large extent on an NI 43-101 report that was done by Canadian consultants in about 1980. They were very, very encouraged by the work they did, and they even produced an inferred resource on that particular property of the potential to develop, 3 or 4 mid-sized or reasonably small, I should say, pits, and bring the ore to a centralized concentrator and produce a copper concentrate in one hand and a zinc, and with a bit of a smattering of gold credits. But it's been looked at by consultants. We've got all their reports. So as I said, Chris is after the big target, big prize, and I'm after building a company with certainty on some of the smaller properties that we can actually fund internally.
Right. So always a little tension there, which is probably good as an investor. But Chris, can you just tell us also maybe a little bit about how do you decide like where to target first when you have a few different projects on the move like you do, or potential projects?
Okay, well, first of all, you look at potential. I mean, as I said, we're looking for projects that have large scale potential, but also have, as Brian said, something that is short term for production as well. So fortunately with Pilar and New Horizons is they both have short term production, but the potential for large discoveries as well. So they're the obvious things there. So for me, you'll always look at areas that have been overlooked as well. So there might be areas that have artisanal mining in them. There might be other areas that have had modern exploration, but there might be areas that have been overlooked completely. And there is a third area in Cuba that we're looking at quite hard now, where the prospectivity to me is mind-blowing. It's very, very similar to the Cretaceous belts in Peru, where you have large manto systems, replacement type systems there. again, those systems are driven by porphyry. So strangely enough, this belt, the age of the intrusions there is Eocene, and that's very important because the Chileno giant porphyry systems, the Sol Gold porphyry in Ecuador, all of these large plus billion-ton deposits are all of that age. So when you find a belt that has these age intrusions in it, you have to look at it seriously. And that's a belt in Cuba that's been completely overlooked. The history of Cuba for mining is quite long and complex. I mean, the oldest copper mine in the Americas is actually in Cuba. El Cobre was started in 1580. So Cuba really is the home to modern mining in the Americas. So it's got a long history. It's very, very prospective, and it's underexplored. Right now, it's a frontier country. We want to be in them because there's very few of them left.
Got it. Hey guys, we're just conscious of time. May open it up now for any questions, or you can always just WhatsApp if you're shy to Sean and myself. That's totally fine as well. The first one, Sean, do you want to read that out?
Yeah. Any indication of grade widths for copper at depth?
Okay, so that's a good question. It's tricky because when you're looking at oxide zones, obviously they're enriched in the surface environment. But funnily enough, one of the last holes that was drilled, we've interpreted as being a classic copper gold porphyry hit, and it was drilled outside of the oxide zone. That hole hit, I think it's open at depth in high grade at about 103 meters at 0.85 grams per ton gold and 0.5 copper. So that's your classic gold to copper ratio. It's quite high for gold, but certainly that's something that we're going to be following up on. So that gives us a feeling for the grades that we're going to be finding in that copper gold system at depth.
Right. What can investors expect to see in terms of news flow in the June quarter?
In the June quarter, we haven't got much of the June quarter left. We've got 1 month.
I think in the quarterly at the end, like.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it'd be more reinforcement of the sort of thing we've just been talking here, because the market at the moment doesn't appreciate that we've got a tiger by the tail. They really don't. I mean, we've announced that these properties have fallen into our exploration agreement with Minera, but we've never given it really any attention as to its true potential, and certainly haven't given it any focus in relation to the shorter term copper, the gold copper oxide cap that we'll probably get to. I don't think there's any great news flow, in fact, until next quarter when we start seeing some results, basically.
Well, you'll be drilling in July, though, isn't that that's right, Chris?
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
And Andrew is saying that you guys are like a Mount Morgan style. Is that?
I can't answer that, Chris might.
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, you can look at it as a kind of analogy. The analogy I like to use for Cuba is, if you look at Solaris in Ecuador, that was drilled in the 80s. They drilled a whole lot of shallow holes, and then just recently they've gone back, drilled the deeper holes, made the big copper moly discovery there, and that company's valued at more than $2 billion now. So that's the kind of value you can add very, very quickly with these kind of deposits. Again, Pilar is outcropping. It's not something where you're drilling deep. You're drilling mineralization from surface there. So it's a very simple walk-up drill target. It's very exciting.
Got it. Hey, someone's asking me a question. It's probably for Brian, but either way, when you're doing a deal in Cuba, how does it work with royalties or structures?
Okay, well, we've got two structures. One is the joint venture agreement. I might add, it took nearly 3 years to negotiate it and get approval from the Council of Ministers. It's a long-winded process, but we have a really excellent joint venture agreement.
Right.
We only have 49% of the shares, but we're protected by the foreign investment law. It's not just us in the mining sector, but tourism, hotels, resorts, agriculture, and so on.
Right.
But even though there's a 51-49% interest, it's really, that only applies effectively to the capital injection. We have equal number of board members, no casting vote by chairman. It's a unanimous decision, effectively, has to happen all the time. So that's the structure. And just as a matter of interest, with the La Demahagua project, Minera transferred the mining concession with about 50,000 metres of drilling on it into the joint venture company. They got $13.5 million worth of shares for that. Probably a little bit more than it's valued at the time. We have to match that with $13 million US for our 49%. That's actually spent in the ground. It's spent on drilling, the DFS, various other things, engineering, metallurgical test work, etc., and infrastructure expenditure. So our 13 million, and after that, we have an obligation.
Like an earning,
Basically, yeah. And after that, we have to arrange but not provide the project finance,
right?
Which will be a bit of a challenge with the US sanctions there, but we're moving on that now.
Right. Got it. Well,
and the other structure, very quickly, the other structure is what they call an IEA, International Economic Association. I call it an exploration agreement. What it allows us is to go through a number of properties that we've either been offered or we identify. We select those that we want to go to the list within that document.
Right.
We at our risk then do preliminary exploration and a scoping study on the economics, and then it goes into the joint venture for a development. And as Chris has said, we've got two really good properties in the moment, and I'm negotiating on the third that he likes, that he selected. So we'll have plenty to do on the exploration front, that's for sure.
Great. Okay, Chris, Brian, we need to unfortunately wrap it up now. Do you have any closing comments for people? Any last remarks?
No, I don't really. These are shareholders, investors watching this program.
Yeah.
I suggest to them they have a good look at our market capitalization and see what's in front of us.
Yep. Great risk reward. Chris, thank you so
right.
much. And really nice to meet you all the way from Colombia. Brian, be well, you're up in Toronto.
Thanks, everyone.
I think there's a big conference there next week. So all good.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Bye, all.
See you later. Thanks.
Thanks for watching another episode of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. And don't forget, if you want access to thousands of capital raises, sign up at 180markets.com.au and you'll get access to our very next capital raise. Thanks for watching.